Vampires, werewolves, fairies, and fallen angels lurk in the shadows. Their intentions are far from honorable. Rougarou, Prikolichi, the Skinwalker, the Varkolak, the Hulajing, or, as known in America and Germany, the werewolf is probably the second most well-known horror monster. Just like Dracula, the Wolfman has its roots going back hundreds of years to about every country that there is. However, something odd has been happening for hundreds of years. People are seeing something they cannot explain. Native Americans have long talked about skinwalkers, and skinwalkers are essentially shape-shifting beings, but most resemble werewolves at times. While the myths and the lore have been warped throughout time, the mere essence of what this being is, or could be, remains very similar in many cultures. Many Native American cultures have their own stories and own beliefs about werewolves, including the Mohawks, but probably no other tribe has spoken more about the werewolf than the Navajos. According to Navajo traditions, the skinwalkers look differently than humans, the main difference being with their eyes, which are often large and glowing even in daylight. What is interesting, however, is that all Native American tribes have their own beliefs and stories, and when Christopher Columbus arrived, they told him these stories, which directly correlates to the other stories going back to France, Romania, and other European countries. What shocked Columbus more than anything was that these tales were so similar to stories coming out of Europe, and the Native Americans had no way of knowing these stories existed outside of their own tribes. However, traditions and tales aside, people are seeing something they cannot explain. These stories or these sightings are getting more prevalent than you might know. Tonight we will discuss some history, some stories, and some sightings we just cannot explain. By the end of this podcast, the hope is that your mind is open enough to understand that there are things in this world we cannot explain. While it is true, there are a million different misidentifications. There are too many stories of people running into whatever this is in different places. While none of these people know each other or have ever met each other, their stories are almost identical. Regardless, people are seeing something they cannot unsee or understand. But the common theme in each of these stories is the terror and fear these people have experienced, and that it's very real to them, even if maybe what they saw isn't. Or is it?
Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright.
Welcome to Wolfsbane Blooms Podcast with your host, Jeff Lohman.
Werewolves may be the thing of legends and lore, but there was something going on out there, something beyond odd. And tonight we're going to mix some old stories with some new ones. In every part of the world, the earliest known cultures all seem to have one type of legend in common, that all men, women, and children somehow turned into animals. Our ancestors were fearful people, and often these shapeshifters were considered to be a serious threat. For centuries in Europe, with its deep, dark forests, the animal everyone was afraid of was the wolf. Thus, in European folklore, the superstition that abounded was that some people could transform into a wolf. The term werewolf originates from the Old English wer, meaning man. In every part of the world, the earliest known creatures all seem to have one type of legend in common, that of men, women, and children turning into animals. Our ancestors were fearful people, and often these shapeshifters were considered a serious but real threat. So where did all of this originate from? Well, it depends on who you ask, but it took on a life of its own prior to the Middle Ages, but didn't grow into the infamous proportions that it did until the Middle Ages. The first noted mention of a werewolf was the Epic of Gilgamesh. In it, Gilgamesh refuses to become the lover of the goddess Ishtar because of her cruel treatment of a previous suitor. Her previous suitor was a shepherd who she turned into a wolf. In Greek mythology, the legend of Lycaon. According to the legend, Lycaon, the son of Pelagus, angered the god Zeus when he served him a meal made from the remains of a sacrificed boy. As punishment for the enraged, Zeus turned Lycaon and his son into wolves. Werewolves also emerged in the early Nordic folklore. The saga of the Volsung tells the story of a father and son who discovered wolf pets that they had the power to turn people into the wolf for 10 days. The father-son duo donned the pelts, transformed into wolves, and went on a killing rampage in the forest. Turns out there may be some actual science behind some of this weird stuff that we hear, because according to a study conducted at Australia's Calvary Mater Newcastle Hospital, a full moon brings out the beast in many humans. The study found that 91 violent acute behavior incidents at the hospitals between August of 2008 and July of 2009, 23% happened during a full moon. Patients attacked staff and displayed wolf-like behaviors, such things as biting, spitting, and scratching. Although many were under alcohol or the influence of drugs at the time, it's unclear why they became intensely violent when the moon was full. So the question remains, did werewolves actually exist? Do they exist? Regardless of what you believe, there is some strange stuff that is definitely going on out there. Thirteenth-century writer Gervase of Tilbury stated that werewolves were common in England in his day. He wrote, "It is certain that there are men who at certain waxings of the moon are transformed into wolves." Strangely, Gervase wrote in his book during the reign of King John of England, and according to an obscure legend, King John himself was a werewolf. In 1185, the future King John traveled to Ossory, which was a kingdom of medieval Ireland that is now mainly in County Kilkenny. Several medieval accounts, including English and Norse, maintain that Ossory was a land full of werewolves. Gerald of Wales, a chronicler who accompanied John to Ireland, recorded a meeting and chatting with werewolves while in Ossory a few years before. It has been supposed, and perhaps more of a leap of imagination than any real evidence, that John mingled with werewolves. Walter Keating Kelly, in his 1863 book on folklore, said, King John of England is said to have gone about as a werewolf after his death. In 1574, Gilles Garnier was convicted of lycanthropy and witchcraft and burned alive at the stake. Garnier, a murderer and cannibal, came to be known as the Werewolf of Dole after his hometown of Dole in eastern France. A few years before his execution, the town was plagued by mysterious deaths and disappearances of local children. People suspected Garnier, the unlikable loner who lived in an isolated house outside of town. One day, Garnier was allegedly caught in the act and arrested. His confession horrified the community as he said a ghost in the woods had given him a potion that allowed him to change into a werewolf. Garnier confessed that as a werewolf, he hunted and attacked young children, killing and eating at least 4. More than 50 of the Dole townsfolk testified at Garnier's trial that he in fact cannibalized innocent victims and was seen sometimes as a man and sometimes as a werewolf. Probably the most famous alleged real werewolf in history is Peter Stump, born around 1535 in the town of Bedburg near Cologne. In an 1846 book describes Stump as being one of the sorcerers termed werewolves, and it was for this and the crime of murder that he was tortured and broken on the wheel in 1589. Stump was a lifelong practitioner of witchcraft and necromancy. His evil activities also included incest with his sister, with whom he fathered children. Stump's sorcery one day enabled him to invoke the devil, which gave him a special ointment and a belt, which when worn, transformed him into a huge werewolf the size of a bear. When Stump was in the form of the beast, he'd hunt, kill, and feast on men, women, and children. He murdered at least 16 people, though the authorities at the time suspected he had slain many, many more. When he wanted to return to human form, Stump would simply remove the belt. When the werewolf couldn't locate any human prey, he'd devour farm animals instead, tearing hapless sheep and goats apart with his huge razor-sharp teeth and claws. About 20 years after Gilles Garnier's reign of terror, another werewolf was on the prowl 140 miles north of Dole. Nicolas Damont was known as the Demon Tailor of the Chalons, and eventually was executed for being a werewolf. Damont, like some kind of horrendous 16th century Sweeney Todd, lured his young victims into his tailor shop, attacked them, and cut their throats. He was also believed to have murdered and devoured people as a werewolf in the forests around the Chalons. His shop eventually was raided by city officials and human remains were found in his cellar. His grisly confessions and court testimony sent shockwaves through France, and the case remains one of the most famous of the so-called werewolf trials, which abounded in Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries. Like Garnier, the wicked tailor was condemned to the stake, where he was roasted alive in 1598. In the 1790s, in the wild countryside of North Wales was actually being terrorized by a savage beast said to have been a werewolf. The first report concerned a horse-drawn coach that was traveling one night on the road between the towns of Denbigh and Wrexham, with a full moon lighting the lonely road. Suddenly, the coach was set upon by a monster described as a huge black beast the size of one of the horses which it had attacked previously and torn apart. In the winter of 1791, a farmer in the same area found a scene straight from a horror film, a mass of dead sheep that had been ripped apart. Massive paw prints which appeared to belong to a huge animal of some kind were seen leading to the bodies of the sheep. This farmer apparently witnessed the werewolf ripping one of his sheep's throats out and ran back to his farmhouse while being pursued by the werewolf. He recounted how the beast walked on its hind legs and peered at him through the windows of the house after banging on the door. The farmer described the creature's eyes as man-like. In about 1798, the werewolf was reportedly seen again, allegedly murdering 2 men whose bodies were found savagely mutilated. After this, the sightings of the werewolf stopped. However, locals continued to move carefully around the moors and forests by Denby for fear of the lurking beast. Those are just a few of the hundreds of infamous stories, and how we went from that to Larry Talbot being bitten by a wolf to becoming a werewolf is a pretty big leap and gap. However, lore is predictable, and it seems like each country's lore and legends twisted and bent the legends before, which is how we get to the Wolfman of 1941. How or when a silver bullet became the ultimate weapon against the werewolf, I don't know. The Roma, which are gypsies based in Romania, still believe in werewolves and vampires today. So traditions and folklore, especially coming from the Balkans, are still alive today. And as we always say on this show, everything is based in some form of truth. Now, this is a part of the story where the legend and lore and myth become absolutely insane or absurd, depending on your viewpoints entirely. There are those who believe that werewolves do exist, and there are those still making claims today that they have seen them, heard them, photographed them, and even filmed them. And my disclaimer is this: scientists are always quick to shoot down ideas that fit outside of their expertise. However, these are the same men who claim dozens of species to be extinct only to find out that they were dead wrong. Just because they are monsters or were derived from lore or myth doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist. We have only explored 20% of the ocean and waterways, and every few years a new kind of fish, thought to be long gone, has shown up. I'm not asking you to believe. I'm asking you to simply think outside the box, because people are seeing something. They're experiencing something that they cannot explain, and all these reports that are coming in are so similar. Something is out there. Just what it is, I don't know. But if it's adventure you seek and a verbal expedition, turn your lights off, get some coffee, get a warm blanket, because it's about to get real. The werewolf, or the Dogman, has become something of a legend, from folklore to book to screen to real life. The Dogman is more or less a werewolf, but there are different variants of the Dogman. However, their first report goes back to 1887 in Wexford County, Michigan, at least specifically with the moniker the Dogman. It would gain a lot of notoriety in the 1990s, but let's talk about 1887 first. The first report of the Dogman sighting described a 7-foot-tall, blue or amber-eyed bipedal dog-like animal with the torso of a man and a howl that sounded like a human scream. Here's an example of what the Dogman allegedly looks like, and here is also a recording of the sound of what the Dogman sounds like. According to the Dogman legend, it appears every 10 years on years ending in the number 7 and can be chased away by clapping. The problem with that legend is there is enough out there to show you that these things are being seen a hell of a lot more frequently, and clapping is the last thing that's going to chase whatever the fuck this is away. The creature has been talked about for a long time and has been seen for a long time, and the Ottawa tribe spoke specifically about this creature. The tribe had seen bipedal-like werewolves which stalked the area surrounding Lake Michigan for decades. Back in 1887, lumberjacks in the area stated they saw something that appeared to be a wolf or a dog with a human-like torso. In 1937, in Paris, Michigan, Robert Fortnoy was attacked by 5 wild dogs, and Robert claimed that one of these beasts walked on 2 feet. Then in the 1950s, more reports came flooding in from the same sort of creature. In the 1990s, the werewolf or the Dogman reports began to pour in from Wisconsin to Michigan and even into Pennsylvania. All these reports were almost identical. The 2 main central hotspots for Dogman activity seem to be Michigan and Wisconsin. Campers, hikers, and even the police have reported seeing something that they cannot identify. The Beast of Bray Road in Elkhorn, Wisconsin is a hotspot as well, where the beast has been seen on the side of the road and is stalking parked cars. It also seems where these things are being seen, dogs go missing in large numbers. Now here's a few stories from Missouri. 2 friends were venturing in the woods near the DuPont Conservation Area when they saw something. It was walking from left to right across the road slowly on all 4s, slinking or kind of slithering. For a lack of better description, like kind of cocky. Seemed to have mange-like mane type of hair. The rest of its body was covered in short hair. The eyes glowed reddish, but were changed because of the different types of lights we were shining on it. A woman was on her way to her mother-in-law's house to pick up her husband on a remote gravel road when she said, "I had just gotten off the blacktop and passed a big farm when this thing jumped from one side of the creek behind the farm across the road in front of me to the other side, which was a field and woods. I stopped the car. First I thought maybe it was a donkey, but to me it was too big and fast, and the tail on it looked more like a dog. I tried to make sense of it. It was so gray, it wasn't a deer or a cow. And it wasn't a horse. There were no hoof beats. It was quiet and it was fast. I haven't seen anything like that again, but there have been reports of dozens of dogs missing and killed in strange ways." Two experienced outdoorsmen were in the woods when they could hear something tracking them when they saw something. It was about 6 feet tall with pointy ears and a long snout. At this point, I have to say that neither of us have given any credence to the Dogman, Wolfman, Grassman theory. We just thought it was a mistaken identification of a Bigfoot or a bear. We could hear something moving around us and echoing short growls. Sometime in the 1970s, a man saw 3 strange beasts feeding on something in a field across from where he was. I saw 3 of them eating something big and bloody in a field. They saw me, looked over, stopped eating, and followed me back to the farm where I got out of there. This happened to me more than 50 years ago. It was forbidden to talk about at the time, but I've never forgotten it. The truth is, everything stems from a particle of truth. But for every particle of truth, there are those who will exploit it for fame and fortune and for attention. What I'm about to play for you is absolutely insane. It's not real, as far as a real sighting, but rather somebody exploiting a simple idea. But it's insane to watch, because I have no idea how any man can run on all 4s like that. I don't even know if that's possible. But here it is anyway, the Gable film. While that Gable film is a noted fake, and a really good one at that, I still cannot figure out how a guy ran on all fours like that. However, there was a video taken in Brazil in 2016 that you will not believe. In fact, I have no idea what I'm looking at. But prepare yourselves, because this is some real stuff. I don't know if anything like this truly exists. I just don't. However, I will not just throw away these reports and claim they are misidentification or people just inventing wild stories. There are just too many reports, and too many credible ones at that, to just simply ignore it. It seems like more often than not, scientists claim or lay claims that this is a simple misidentification, and perhaps in some small samples it is. However, most can distinguish between dogs, big cats, bears, and other animals, and there is zero explanation for why these people would come forward with these in-depth descriptions of something that we have been taught that does not exist or can't. The reality is, these people were terrified, and they still are today. There is something going on out there, something we just don't understand, and something that evokes fear. Deathly fear of these people, and we cannot discount that. So if you're out there looking for something, be careful, you might just come across it. For those skeptics, ask yourself how many thousands of reports are just so similar. They are seeing something, and what that is, I have no interest in experiencing myself. All the garlic, all the silver bullets won't help you out there. And for those in search of beasts, be careful, because you might just find what you're looking for.